But if you would like to prepare for it, honestly, SAT vocab is very hard, and the best thing to do is read a lot of books to get very good at the vocab, unless you want to go through a lot of flashcards, which I didn't really want to do. And then the best thing about it is practice tests. It's about learning how to take a test, not about how good you are or whether you're a 4.0 student. It doesn't really matter. You need to get good at taking the test. So take the test. Take practice tests if you think that's important. And most importantly, focus on yourself and not others. My school was very competitive, and people would share their scores and talk about it. I never really like to do that because every person brings something unique to the table, and when you're applying to colleges, it's not about what you did in your writing score or SAT. It's about who you are as a full person, and it's not going to dictate your admittance or not. So it's definitely don't focus on it and compare yourself to others. APs, you can see the classes I took. Sophomore year, I took European history. Junior, I took United States history and BC calculus. And then senior year, I took physics and chemistry. Every single one of these classes, I could probably still tell you a fair bit about it because I was interested in every single one of them. I have friends that took 9 or 10 APs, and they were exhausted. They hated high school, whereas I really enjoyed every class I took. I can still remember my European history AP test, actually, and it was probably my favorite class of high school, even though I'm a computer science major now. So take classes that you're interested in, because it's a lot of work to take an AP class. And if you want to devote the time, you're going to devote the time to it if you're interested in it, and otherwise it's just going to be a chore. And again, the difference between taking 6 APs and taking 3 APs is not going to make the difference between getting into college or not. And since it is a year-long test, start studying early. I was a little bit neurotic and would reread the history textbook like twice, but that was really for myself, not because it was actually useful, because I think the most useful thing is to practice writing, because it's timed and it's fast, and you need to get good at writing the essays. So again, start practice early and take practice exams, because it's about the format. The format doesn't change year to year, and it's good to take it because they're a lot different from high school tests. Okay, selecting colleges. So the best thing I think is to start broad. Even if you're sure that you want to go to a small liberal arts school, look at a big school, because it's nice to have different perspective. I was sure I wasn't going to leave California because I was tired of being told that I was a California person for my entire life, and I ended up in California because it was the best school for me. You should consider things like if you want a big school, small school, where the location is, what the weather is like, whether you want to if it's important to be close to home or not. And definitely start early, because then you can consider many of these things. Try to visit as many of them as you can, because you definitely get something different. And I suggest don't go on the Ivy tour. That's what the majority of my friends did, and honestly, Columbia and Brown are very, very different. One has the open curriculum, and one has a huge core curriculum, and I knew from the start that I was never going to be able to enjoy a school where basically my classes were dictated to me for 2 years. So I crossed out Columbia before I even started the college search. So do your research early, because then you can spend time looking at colleges you actually can see yourself at. And Ivy is just a college football designation for a sports league. It doesn't mean it's better than anything else. So try different things. There's plenty of schools out there. There's a reason there's thousands of schools, because everyone can find some place that's right for them. And it doesn't necessarily have to be Harvard. Okay, again, with the application process, start early because it creeps up on you. It's something that it's probably one of the first times in your life where you have to get something done and you haven't been told by a teacher over and over again that you have a hard deadline. It's something that you're responsible for. You're responsible for starting early, and I didn't start early. I was late on it because I was like, oh, I've got plenty of time. What could be easier than writing an essay about myself? Well, it turns out it is hard to write an essay about yourself when you're sure that you're only getting probably 5 to 10 minutes of someone's attention, and you have to try to convince them why you're going to that school, when you know for a fact that you're applying to 12 other schools that are different. Try to maintain perspective throughout it. A lot of times you will fall into the feeling of loving a school just for writing the application, and it's important to remember there's a reason why you're applying to it, and like try to step back and say which one really is right for you. And this is where it's really important to talk to people at the school, which is what Fresh Mentors is involved with. It's definitely, I talked to my cousin because she went to Stanford before I went to Stanford, and she gave me insight into the fact that Stanford has much more of a lot of athletes, which I didn't even realize. I knew it was Division I, but I didn't realize that there were so many of them, and that it actually did impact the culture of the school. So it's something that definitely try to talk to people at the school, because even on a tour, you're not going to get everything. The one thing that struck me the most the first day I came to Stanford that I won't forget is how much spirit Stanford students have. I didn't know until the first night, and I really wish I had, and I got lucky because I loved it, but this is the kind of thing where it really helps to talk to someone. And then, most importantly, plan for change. You're going to change your mind. I came in thinking I was going to be a physics major, and I dropped that assumption within about 2 weeks. It's definitely probably the most constant thing of college, so don't think too hard about, or don't fall in love and be so set on one thing. And basically, I think the best advice I got was, don't pick a school because it has something really good that you think you're going to do. Like, for instance, if you're sure you're going to major in physics, so you pick the best physics school, but then what happens when you decide you don't want to major in physics anymore? Maybe disregard a school if they have a bad physics program because you think, oh, I'm going to major in physics. But don't pick a school because of that. Pick it because it's got the best overall culture that you think you'll fit in. And you'll find your place where you're happy. I'm sure of it. Finally, how parents could help. Probably the most important thing my parents did for me was they encouraged independent thinking. From my freshman year of high school, I picked my classes, I managed my time, because that was probably the most important trait I had to develop. But if you must get involved and you want to really help your child, the best place to probably help them and then to take a step back is when they're first starting their college search. Because it can be a little daunting to say, wait, I have to come up with 12 schools that I want to apply to. So you can give them a list of schools that you'd like them to apply to. The one request that my parents gave for me, my siblings and I, was that we look at their alma mater, which we all did, but we were under no obligation to apply to them. So that was probably the most important thing my parents did. They just let us take care of it, because we're going to college, not our parents, and you're not around forever. And you have to start dealing with jobs, and you need to find what you like, and college is really about discovering what you're interested in. So, to sum it up, just be supportive, because this is probably a very hard time for some people. They're very, very stressed out, and then everyone's telling them what they need to do, and everyone's telling them they need to go to Harvard or Yale, they need to go to Stanford, and it's just, it's hard enough for students as it is. So just be supportive. Thank you.
Yeah. We're going to only answer 2 questions. Sorry. Miss Neff. We're only going to answer 2 questions at each Q&A session because of time, but there will be a cumulative Q&A session at the end if you want to ask more questions.
Okay. Does anyone have any questions? Yes.
What do you think the main character qualified?
The main quality that qualified me for Stanford? If I'm to be honest, it's that they thought I was going to ride for their equestrian team. Yes. Because I fell in love with computer science after my first class. I was originally planning on taking physics in the winter because that's when you start. And frankly, the physics department hadn't been very supportive of me. and I loved my computer science course, and I've never looked back.
Thank you very much, Ms. Neff. Now I'd like to welcome our next speaker, Mr. Michael Silverman. He's also a student at Stanford.
Great, so thanks for coming out today. Hopefully I'll provide you with some valuable advice, and I just want to thank Jocelyn again for giving that great overview of Stanford. Stanford's an amazing place, and hopefully I'll give you a little bit more information about it. But one component of the admissions process that I think is overlooked that I want to emphasize in this presentation is the narrative that you tell. So I'll kind of emphasize where I'm coming from, what narrative I told to get into Stanford, and kind of how you guys can look at telling your narrative in the hopes of getting into the college of your choice. So just a little bit of background about me. Michael Silverman, that's my name. Currently a senior at Stanford, a rising senior. My major is management science and engineering. So that essentially means it's industrial engineering. So there's a lot of optimization, probability, statistics, that kind of stuff. And students generally go into finance or management and consulting or the tech startup scene we've got out here in the Bay. Originally from Phoenix, Arizona, and went to a high school with about 600 kids, K through 12, private. Schools in Phoenix in the public school system are not very good, so private was pretty much the only choice I had. So kind of what was my narrative in high school? What did I have coming out that nobody else had that got me into Stanford? So I focused primarily on sustainability. And at the time that I was applying to Stanford, sustainability and the green movement was much more in vogue than it is now after the recent financial crisis. So that definitely played to my strength in terms of getting me in. But how I approach this is you want to have a story to tell. When you've got interviews or you've got an admissions essay you've got to write, if you're just sitting there late at night with just your scores and a couple activities you didn't really care about, it is going to be very, very difficult to tell that narrative. So how do you tell that narrative? It's hard. This is something you have to develop over time, and this is really where strategic thinking pays off. So I started out really interested in sustainability. And I just kind of started exploring stuff that I might find interesting, and eventually that led me to doing a couple projects involved with sustainability. So as you can see, I've got a couple grants up there that I wrote and did projects around. So how does this go back to the narrative? Well, I got multiple press mentions for each of these projects. I was involved with the community. I got the mayor to come to one of my opening ceremonies for one of the projects. That's a story that I can tell to an interviewer that plays very well. It's something that I care about, it's something I'm passionate about, and it's not BS, it's genuine. So you want to look for a way to express your passion, whatever that may be, to the nth degree. Because you've got to remember, you're not just competing against the people in your high school or your town. This is a worldwide competition now. You're competing from people all across the world. So whatever you love, do it to the nth degree that you possibly can. To give you an example, my brother's starting Duke on Monday, and he really loves video games. And video games, you might say, right? That is an awful time-wasting activity we should all banish from our children's lives, right? He was a competitive gamer. So one of the things he talked about with his Duke interviewer was how competitive gaming taught him about teamwork and working with other people in difficult situations. So where that might be kind of an eccentric interest, you can really turn that into a strength to tell your story and to relate it back to why you should get it. So again, kind of going back to my narrative here, I'm also a lifetime traveler and photographer. So for my projects, I did all the photography, I wrote all the press releases, I did all the interviews. So having that kind of complete package centering around those anchor projects helped enormously in telling my story. Telling my story both via essays and also via interviews. So I hope this is kind of giving you an idea of where I'm going with this idea of a narrative. It can't just be a disparate set of components that you string together at the last second. This is kind of a long-term game that you need to play with something that you're passionate about. So, how to plan high school. Plan for some serendipity in high school. I would encourage you to look around and see what do you really love. Take a look at it. I know the follow the passion advice is kind of cliched at this point, but again, follow it to the nth degree. Go meet people in the field. Talk to them, interview them, do whatever you can to get involved, and that will naturally flow. So how about clubs, leadership roles, coursework, APs, and standardized testing? Unfortunately, they're a necessary evil to a certain degree. You need to score very, very well to get into schools like Stanford, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, that kind of stuff. And I certainly did well. However, on the same token, one bad score is not going to sink me. I guarantee it because I've been there. I got a 560 on my chemistry SAT 2, applying to Stanford. Did not sink me at all. And you would think that might sink a person, but it doesn't. They really do focus on your entire application. And if you can tell a good story, it doesn't matter. One component is not going to be your weakness or your downfall. Coursework. So this is one component that I wish somebody had told me how to do it. So there are certain APs that are more useful than others when you get to college, specifically if you're going into engineering. So this is AP Physics, AP Stat, AP Calc. Those kinds of entry-level classes would have saved me an enormous amount of time when I got to Stanford, had I known that in advance. It's also much more competitive once you get to Stanford. The calc classes are not the same as the ones you took in high school. They're college-level calculus classes or college-level physics classes. So at the same time, they make your life easier. You get to take other cool classes, and they're just a great all-around experience in the sense that you'll have that AP component on your narrative, but it won't be central to what you're trying to pitch. So kind of also the clubs and leaderships components of this. So clubs, I'm a fan of founding a club. I think founding one around your interest and taking that to the nth degree, again, is the best way to do it. Because it gives you the most freedom and least restrictive path to making progress. So with my projects, I founded them. I did soup to nuts the entire project. So nobody was there to hold me back. There's very little bureaucratic, there were very few bureaucratic people that I had to get past in order to get things done. The only person that I had to have the decision pass muster with was me. So you want to look for those kinds of situations where you can really get a lot of leverage out of your time. If you're on a club where you're either not heavily involved enough, or you just don't have decision-making power, it can really stimulate your ability to get things done and get them done to the degree that you want to get them done. And the degree that is good enough to get into a Stanford or Yale or Harvard, wherever you might be aiming to get. So, bottom line is, play the game according to your rules on your terms. One thing that I constantly emphasized in the way I was approaching high school was, if I didn't get in anywhere, if I had to go find a job somewhere without going to college, would I be happy with what I've done in high school? Would I be happy with all the AP work that I've done? Just because I learned something and it wasn't practically applicable. If I had done all these sustainability projects and they didn't get me anywhere, and they fell apart the next year, would I have been happy with the intrinsic value that I did a positive good for my community? For me, the answer was yes for all of those things. And again, I think that comes out in the narrative that you can tell to people. If they can tell that you're genuinely just doing this out of interest, it's not hard for them to pick up on that enthusiasm. I mean, it's just genuinely infectious, and that's what you want to have when you're telling your story. And that comes across in essays. That comes across in your application. And believe me, they can tell. You can't fake it, but this is something you can build over time. So what about hobbies? So that's one component I didn't address before, and a lot of people see high school as a time where they need to cut back on the time that they spend on their hobbies because they feel, man, I better study another hour for this AP, or man, I better take another SAT practice test. And one component is that downtime where you are not focusing on your absolute goal of getting into the college of your choice. So how do you do this? Well, one way to do this is, for me, was to go hiking. I live in Phoenix, Arizona, which is there's many hiking spots around town. So every day after high school, without fail, I would go hiking for an hour. You might say, man, that's a lot of time. Over a year, an hour every day? Didn't you have something to go to, or a test to take, or after-school tutoring to go to? Maybe I should have done that. But when I tell my narrative and tell people that I've been hiking for years, and that was one of my hobbies, and that it all fits together with my photography and sustainability, that's another component that I can rely on when I tell my story. So your hobbies don't have to fit into that narrative, but they probably will naturally, just based on the stuff you're interested in and what you tend to pursue. So if you're noticing that you're forcing a lot of this, it's probably not the way to go. There's probably an easier and more appropriate activity that you could be pursuing and that you'll enjoy more. So, I mean, in the end, and while this is applicable to selecting colleges, it's also just about how to live your life in high school, which is one of the most, I guess, stressful times in your life. There are very few competitions like getting into college, and don't underestimate the stress that it can put on you. So I guess my advice is just to be honest with what you want and why you want it. But more importantly, why you want it. Because when I was applying to colleges, I didn't apply to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, anything back east. You might ask me why, right? They're great schools. Well, I'm from Phoenix. I see about 300 days of sunshine a year. You're not going to put me in an icebox back east and have me enjoy it. It's just not going to work for me. So I knew that. I knew I wanted warm weather. I wanted the sunshine that's out here in the Bay Area. So I applied to schools in California and down in the South that I knew I could stand weather-wise. So that was a critical component for me. And you might say, man, that's a shallow characteristic, right? Who evaluates their colleges based on weather? But for me, that was important. I wanted to be able to go outside with my friends and play Frisbee in the winter, which you can do at Stanford. You can't do that at Harvard or Princeton. Well, you can, it'll just be really cold. But, so just be honest with what you want. And again, that also comes out in the story you tell. If you are genuinely interested then you can say that in your interviews. You can say, it was a great starting topic when I was talking about Stanford or Duke or wherever I was applying. I want to apply because it's warm weather. There's people to meet outside. Silicon Valley really appeals to me, my entrepreneurial nature, that kind of stuff. If you're really honest with yourself, you're going to naturally filter down the colleges that you're applying to. And it will be much easier than you think of going through a college book at 500 that really doesn't tell you anything at all. So I first urge you to look inwards and then look outwards at the colleges that you're looking at. So how do you find what you want, right? So this is kind of about being honest with yourself, but also talk to people. Talk to as many people as possible about everything. This may be about your interests, and your mentors may be able to tell you, you should look at this college, it'd be great for entrepreneurship, or whatever X activity that you're interested in. You never know where you're going to find valuable information, so talk to everybody. We use this a lot in Silicon Valley in the sense when you're doing startups that there's no answers inside your office. Or in this case, there's no answers inside your house. You need to get outside. You need to talk to people who know about this stuff, ex-students, current students, anybody, just to get a different perspective that might bring up something you hadn't thought of. So, also, bottom line question is, why are you going to college? I know this is a difficult question to ask because you want to be successful, wealthy, and wise at the end of your life and have a beautiful home and a beautiful family and that kind of thing. But you need to seriously ask yourself why you're going to college in the sense that will drastically drop down the choices that you're looking at. I was interested in sustainability, entrepreneurship, sunny weather. That really cuts down the choices. Stanford is number one in all of those. So I knew that I wanted to go to Stanford just based on what I had been interested in for years. And that was a genuine interest. It wasn't manufactured, it wasn't fake, and they can tell. So just be honest with yourself and just ask yourself, why am I doing all this? Why am I putting all this effort into something if I don't genuinely want it? So just think about that. And finally, how can parents help? So it's a touchy subject in the sense that you want the best for your children, and my parents certainly did want the best for me as well.